Hey there. Tonight we'll talk about the entire lore of Assassin's Creed. If this kind of tale helps you rest, feel free to like the video, but only if it brings you some peace, and I'd love to know in the comments where you're listening from. It's a real comfort to know who else is out there settling in. This is a tale of two ancient orders locked in eternal conflict, of powerful artifacts that can reshape reality, of ancestors and descendants connected through genetic memory, and of the eternal struggle between freedom and control. Settle in as we explore one of gaming's most ambitious and complex narratives, a story that weaves together history, science fiction, and philosophy into an epic that has captivated millions. The story of Assassin's Creed begins not with humans, but with those who came before us. Long before recorded history, before the pyramids of Egypt or the temples of Greece, before humanity had even developed language or civilization, the Earth was ruled by a different species entirely. They were called the Isu, though throughout history they would be known by many names. The first civilization, those who came before, the precursors. They were beings of incredible power and knowledge, possessing technology so advanced it would appear as magic to human eyes. The Isu were not gods, though humans would later worship them as such. They were flesh and blood, mortal despite their power. But they had achieved a level of technological and scientific advancement that humanity would not reach for tens of thousands of years. They built great cities, created wonders that defied the laws of nature as humans understood them, and shaped the world according to their will. But the Isu had a problem. They needed labour to build their civilization, workers to maintain their cities and serve their needs. So the Isu created humanity. Using their advanced genetic engineering capabilities, they designed humans to be the perfect workforce. Intelligent enough to follow complex instructions and perform sophisticated tasks, but docile and obedient, incapable of rebellion or independent thought. Humans were slaves from the moment of their creation, bred to serve and nothing more. The Isu controlled their human slaves through powerful artifacts called Pieces of Eden, technological devices that could manipulate the human mind, suppress free will, and ensure absolute obedience. For thousands of years this system worked perfectly. Humans served the Isu without question, building their cities, tending their needs, living and dying as tools rather than as sentient beings. The Isu civilization flourished, reaching heights of achievement that would never be matched. But the Isu had made a mistake in their creation of humanity. In their desire to create intelligent workers, they had given humans the capacity for thought, for emotion, for the spark of consciousness that defines sentient life. And that spark, suppressed though it was, could not be extinguished forever. Two humans changed everything. Their names have been lost to history, remembered only through myth and legend. Later cultures would call them Adam and Eve, the first man and woman, but they were not the first humans. They were the first free humans. Through a genetic mutation, or perhaps through sheer force of will, Adam and Eve developed resistance to the Pieces of Eden. The artifacts that controlled all other humans had no power over them. They could think freely, choose freely, act according to their own will rather than the will of their masters. Adam and Eve did what any enslaved people would do when given the chance. They rebelled. They stole a piece of Eden, an apple that the Isu had been using to control the human population, and they fled. Their escape triggered something the Isu had never anticipated, a human uprising. Inspired by Adam and Eve's example, other humans began to resist. The resistance to the Pieces of Eden spread, whether through genetic inheritance or through some other mechanism, and suddenly the Isu found themselves facing a slave revolt on a massive scale. The war between the Isu and humanity was catastrophic. The Isu had superior technology and individual power, but humans had numbers. For every Isu, there were thousands of humans, and once freed from mental control, humans proved to be fierce and determined fighters. Cities burned, civilizations crumbled, and the world descended into chaos. But neither side would win this war because a greater catastrophe was approaching, one that neither the Isu nor humanity could prevent or survive. The Isu had known for some time that a solar flare of unprecedented magnitude was approaching Earth. Their scientists had calculated its arrival and understood its devastating potential, but they had been too focused on maintaining their civilization and controlling their human slaves to adequately prepare. When the flare struck around 75,000 BCE, it was an extinction-level event. The electromagnetic pulse destroyed most Isu technology. Massive earthquakes reshaped continents, tsunamis drowned coastal regions, and volcanic eruptions darkened the skies. The Isu civilization, which had stood for millennia, was destroyed in a matter of days. The Isu died. Not all at once, and not all in the initial catastrophe, but their numbers were so reduced, and their civilization so thoroughly destroyed that they could not recover. The few survivors lived on for a time, trying desperately to preserve their knowledge and prevent humanity from making the same mistakes. But eventually they too passed into extinction. Humanity survived, barely. The human population was reduced to perhaps a few thousand individuals, scattered across the devastated world, but humans proved more adaptable than their creators. Slowly, painfully, humanity rebuilt. The pieces of Eden survived the catastrophe. These artifacts, designed to be nearly indestructible, remained scattered across the world, buried in ruins, hidden in caves, waiting to be discovered by the descendants of those who had once been enslaved by them. And as humanity slowly climbed back from the brink of extinction, as civilizations began to form again, these artifacts would shape human history in ways both profound and terrible. Thousands of years passed. Humanity forgot the Isu, forgot the war, forgot everything except vague myths and legends. The Isu became gods in human memory. Zeus, Odin, Ra, Minerva, their true nature lost to time, but the pieces of Eden remained, and those who found them gained power beyond imagination. The apples of Eden could control minds, making entire populations obedient to the wielder's will. The staves of Eden granted authority and dominion, making their bearers into kings and pharaohs. The swords of Eden gave their wielders unmatched combat prowess. These artifacts shaped the rise and fall of empires, the outcomes of wars, the course of human civilization itself. And so we come to ancient Egypt, to the year 49 BCE, where our story truly begins. Egypt is in turmoil, caught in a civil war between Queen Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII. The land that was once the cradle of civilization is now a battleground for power, and in the shadows, ancient forces are moving, seeking artifacts and knowledge that could reshape the world. In this time of chaos and conflict, a man named Bayek of Siwa will set in motion events that will echo through the centuries. Bayek is a Medjay, the last of an ancient order of protectors who served the pharaohs of Egypt. The Medjay were originally nomads from Nubia, who became elite warriors and peacekeepers, sworn to protect the people of Egypt from threats both external and internal. But by Bayek's time, the Medjay are all but extinct. their order reduced to a single man carrying on a tradition that most Egyptians have forgotten. Bayek takes his duty seriously, travelling across Egypt to help those in need, to protect the innocent, to uphold justice in a land where justice is increasingly rare. But Bayek's life is shattered when his son Kemu is murdered. The boy is killed by members of a secret organisation called the Order of the Ancients, who are seeking a piece of Eden hidden in a vault that only Kemu can open. They force the boy to open the vault, and when he cannot, they kill him, leaving Bayek and his wife Aya consumed by grief and rage. This personal tragedy becomes the catalyst for something much larger, the birth of the Assassin Brotherhood. Though Bayek and Aya begin hunting down the members of the Order of the Ancients who were responsible for their son's death. One by one they track down these conspirators, these men who hide in the shadows and manipulate events for their own gain. But as they pursue their revenge, they begin to understand that the Order of the Ancients is not just a small group of conspirators, it's a vast organisation with members throughout Egypt and beyond. An organisation dedicated to controlling humanity through manipulation, fear, and the power of the pieces of Eden. The Order of the Ancients believes that humanity needs to be controlled, that free will leads only to chaos and suffering, and that a small group of enlightened individuals should guide humanity's development for its own good. They seek the pieces of Eden not for personal power, but to create a world of perfect order, where everyone knows their place and follows the path laid out for them. It's a philosophy that sounds noble on the surface, but it requires the suppression of human freedom, the elimination of choice, the reduction of humanity to a managed resource. Bayek and Aya realize that killing the men who murdered their son is not enough. The Order of the Ancients will continue to exist, will continue to manipulate and control, will continue to cause suffering in pursuit of their vision of order. And so Bayek and Aya make a decision that will change history. They will create an organisation to oppose the Order of the Ancients, a brotherhood dedicated to protecting human freedom and fighting against those who would control humanity. In 47 BCE, Bayek and Aya found the Hidden Ones, the organisation that will eventually become the Assassin Brotherhood. They recruit others who share their vision, men and women who have been wronged by the Order of the Ancients, who have seen the cost of tyranny and control, who believe that humanity deserves freedom even if that freedom comes with risk and chaos. The Hidden Ones operate in secret, striking from the shadows, eliminating those who would enslave humanity, protecting the innocent from those who would exploit them. The Hidden Ones adopt symbols and practices that will define the Assassin Brotherhood for centuries to come. They wear hoods to conceal their identities, allowing them to move through crowds unnoticed. They develop the Hidden Blade, a weapon that can be concealed beneath clothing and deployed in an instant, perfect for assassination. They adopt the eagle as their symbol, representing freedom, vision, and the ability to strike from above. And they develop a creed, a set of principles to guide their actions. Stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent, hide in plain sight, never compromise the Brotherhood. The conflict between the Hidden Ones and the Order of the Ancients spreads beyond Egypt. Aya, who takes the name Amunet, travels to Rome and becomes instrumental in the assassination of Julius Caesar, who had been corrupted by the Order of the Ancients and was using a piece of Eden to control the Roman people. The Hidden Ones establish branches throughout the known world, adapting to local cultures while maintaining their core mission of protecting human freedom. Over the centuries, both organisations evolve. The Order of the Ancients eventually becomes the Knights Templar, taking their name from the medieval military order, but maintaining the same philosophy of control and order. The Hidden Ones become the Assassin Brotherhood, refining their techniques, expanding their reach, and passing down their knowledge through generations. The conflict between these two organizations becomes the secret history of the world, the shadow war that shapes human civilization from behind the scenes. We jump forward now to the year 1191 CE, to the fortress of Masyaf in the mountains of Syria, where the Assassin Brotherhood has established one of its most important strongholds. The assassins of this era are led by Al-Mualim, a wise and respected mentor who has guided the Brotherhood for decades. Among his students is a young man named Altair ibn La'ahad, who has risen to the rank of Master Assassin at the unprecedented age of 25, making him one of the most skilled and deadly members of the Brotherhood. Altair is arrogant, confident in his abilities to the point of recklessness. When Al-Mualim sends him to Solomon's temple in Jerusalem to retrieve a piece of Eden from the Templars, Altair's overconfidence leads to disaster. He attacks the Templars without proper reconnaissance, gets his fellow assassin Kadar killed, and fails to secure the artifact. Worse, he leads the Templars back to Masyaf, resulting in an attack on the assassin stronghold that nearly destroys the Brotherhood. As punishment for his failures, Al-Mualim strips Altair of his rank and equipment, reducing him to the status of a novice. But Al-Mualim also gives him a chance at redemption. Altair must assassinate 9 men, Templars and their allies, who are spreading corruption and tyranny throughout the Holy Land. With each successful assassination, Altair will regain a piece of his equipment and a measure of his former status. It's a test of skill, but also a lesson in humility and understanding. As Altair carries out his assassinations, he begins to learn uncomfortable truths. Each of his targets, in their final moments, speaks of a larger plan, of a goal that transcends simple conquest or wealth. They speak of bringing order to a chaotic world, of ending the wars and suffering that plague humanity, of creating peace through control. Altair begins to question whether these men are truly evil, or whether they're pursuing a goal that, while misguided, comes from a genuine desire to help humanity. The 9th target is Robert de Sablé, Grand Master of the Knights Templar. Altair confronts him and learns a shocking truth. All 9 targets, assassins and Templars alike, were working together under the direction of Al-Mualim. The mentor of the assassins has been using both organizations to eliminate anyone who knew about the Apple of Eden, so that he alone would possess its power. Al-Mualim has betrayed everything the assassins stand for, using them as tools to achieve his own vision of a controlled, ordered world. Altair returns to Masyaf to confront his mentor. He finds Al-Mualim using the Apple of Eden to control the minds of the assassins, turning them into mindless servants. The fortress that was once a bastion of freedom has become a prison, its inhabitants enslaved by the very artifact they were supposed to protect humanity from. Altair, through force of will and his training, resists the Apple's influence and kills Al-Mualim, freeing the assassins from his control. But Altair makes a fateful decision. Rather than destroying the Apple, he keeps it, believing he can study it and learn its secrets without being corrupted by its power. He spends the rest of his long life studying the Apple, using the knowledge it contains to revolutionize the Assassin Brotherhood. He develops new weapons, new techniques, new philosophies. He writes his discoveries in a series of codex pages, creating a record of his knowledge that will guide the Brotherhood for centuries. Altair's studies of the Apple reveal the truth about the Isu, about the creation of humanity, about the war that nearly destroyed both species, where he learns about other pieces of Eden scattered across the world, about the temples and vaults where the Isu stored their knowledge, about the warnings they left for humanity about future catastrophes. This knowledge transforms the Assassin Brotherhood's understanding of their mission. They're not just fighting for freedom in the present, they're protecting humanity's future from threats both human and cosmic. In his final years, Altair seals himself and the apple in a library beneath Masyaf, leaving behind a message for future assassins. He has learned that the apple is too dangerous to be used, that its power corrupts even the strongest will, and that it must be hidden away where neither assassins nor Templars can find it. His library becomes a legend, a treasure that both organizations will seek for centuries, believing it contains the ultimate knowledge and power. We move forward now to Renaissance Italy, to the year 1476, where a young nobleman named Ezio Auditore da Firenze is about to have his life destroyed and remade. Ezio is 17 years old, the second son of a wealthy Florentine banker, living a life of privilege and pleasure. He spends his days chasing women, getting into street fights, and enjoying the cultural flowering of the Renaissance. He has no idea that his father, Giovanni Auditore, is a member of the Assassin Brotherhood, working in secret to oppose Templar influence in Italy. Sactu nostuantis. Giovanni has uncovered a Templar conspiracy involving some of the most powerful families in Florence, including the Pazzi family and a Spanish nobleman named Rodrigo Borgia. He has gathered evidence of their plot and plans to present it to the authorities, believing that exposing the conspiracy will be enough to stop it. But Giovanni underestimates the Templars' reach and influence. His friend Uberto Alberti, the Gonfaloniere of Florence, is himself a Templar, and he betrays Giovanni to protect the conspiracy. Giovanni, along with Ezio's older brother Federico and younger brother Petruccio, are arrested on false charges of treason. Ezio, who was away from home, escapes arrest. He rushes to help his family, but he's too late. Uberto has ordered their execution, and Ezio can only watch helplessly as his father and brothers are hanged in the public square. In a single day, Ezio loses his father, his brothers, his home, his fortune, and his innocence. The carefree young nobleman dies, and something harder and more dangerous is born in his place. Ezio's mother and sister survive, and they flee Florence with the help of family friends. They make their way to the Auditore family villa in Monteriggioni, where Ezio's uncle Mario reveals the truth. The Auditore family has been part of the Assassin Brotherhood for generations, and Giovanni was working to stop a Templar plot when he was betrayed and killed. Mario begins training Ezio in the ways of the assassins, teaching him to fight, to move unseen, to kill efficiently and without hesitation. Ezio's quest for vengeance becomes a decades-long campaign against the Templars in Italy. He hunts down and kills Uberto Alberti, the man who betrayed his father. He dismantles the Pazzi conspiracy, preventing them from seizing control of Florence. He travels to Venice, where he uncovers more Templar plots and makes allies among the courtesans, thieves, and mercenaries who operate in the shadows of the city. Slowly, Ezio transforms from a young man seeking revenge into a true assassin, dedicated not just to avenging his family, but to protecting all of Italy from Templar control. Ezio's investigations lead him to Rodrigo Borgia, the Spanish cardinal who is the Grand Master of the Italian Templars. Rodrigo is obsessed with finding a piece of Eden called the Apple, and using it to access a vault beneath the Vatican that supposedly contains great power. Ezio realizes that Rodrigo's plot extends beyond simple political power. He's seeking something that could threaten all of humanity. The conflict between Ezio and Rodrigo becomes personal, a battle not just between assassin and Templar, but between two men with fundamentally different visions of what humanity should be. In 1492, Rodrigo Borgia becomes Pope Alexander VI, using bribery, blackmail and murder to secure his election. As Pope, he has access to the Vatican and the vault beneath it. Ezio infiltrates the Vatican and confronts Rodrigo in the vault, a chamber built by the Isu thousands of years ago. They fight for control of the apple, and Ezio emerges victorious, but he chooses not to kill Rodrigo, showing mercy even to his greatest enemy. This decision reflects Ezio's growth as an assassin. He's no longer driven purely by revenge, but by a deeper understanding of the Brotherhood's principles. In the vault, Ezio encounters a holographic message from an Isu named Minerva. She speaks not to Ezio, but through him, addressing someone named Desmond who will experience Ezio's memories centuries in the future. Minerva warns of a coming catastrophe, a second solar flare that will devastate Earth just as the first one destroyed the Isu civilization. She tells Desmond that he must find the temples and vaults where the Isu stored their knowledge, that humanity's survival depends on understanding and preventing this catastrophe. Ezio doesn't understand the message, but he knows it's important, and he dedicates himself to uncovering more Isu secrets. Ezio's story continues in Rome, and where Rodrigo's son Cesare Borgia has taken control of the Templar Order and is using it to conquer Italy. Cesare is more ruthless and ambitious than his father, willing to use any means necessary to achieve his goals. He attacks Monteriggioni, destroys the Auditor Villa, and steals the Apple of Eden that Ezio had been guarding. Ezio must rebuild the Assassin Brotherhood in Rome, recruiting new members, establishing hideouts, and slowly liberating the city from Templar control. The conflict with Cesare becomes a war for the soul of Rome. Ezio systematically dismantles Cesare's power base, assassinating his allies, destroying his resources, and turning the people of Rome against him. He recovers the Apple of Eden and uses it to reveal Cesare's crimes to the public, destroying his reputation and his power. Cesare is arrested and imprisoned, and Ezio finally achieves the goal he's been pursuing for decades. The Templar Order in Italy is broken, and the assassins are restored to prominence. But Ezio's journey is not over. In his 50s, he travels to Constantinople, seeking the library of Altair and the knowledge it contains. He becomes entangled in the conflict between the Ottoman Empire and the Byzantine Templars, who are seeking the same library. Ezio must find 5 keys hidden throughout Constantinople, each one guarded by challenges and puzzles left by Altair centuries ago. As he searches for the keys, Ezio falls in love with Sofia Sarta, a Venetian woman who runs a bookshop in Constantinople, and he begins to question whether he wants to spend the rest of his life as an assassin. When Ezio finally reaches Altair's library, he finds not treasure or weapons, but Altair's body, seated peacefully, holding the Apple of Eden. Altair has left a final message, explaining that the apple is too dangerous to use, that the pursuit of power and knowledge can corrupt even the best intentions, and that sometimes the wisest choice is to walk away. Ezio, seeing his own future and Altair's fate, makes a decision. He leaves the apple in the library, sealed away where it can't harm anyone, and he retires from the Assassin Brotherhood to live a peaceful life with Sofia. Ezio's story ends in Florence, where he dies peacefully at the age of 65, sitting on a bench with his family. He has lived a full life, has seen his children grow, has found peace after decades of conflict. His final words are a reflection on his journey, on the choices he made, on the life he lived. Ezio Auditore da Firenze, who began as a young man seeking revenge, ends as a wise elder who has learned that there are things more important than the eternal conflict between assassins and Templars. But the conflict continues, as it always does. We move forward now to the 18th century, to the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean, where a Welsh privateer named Edward Kenway is about to become entangled in the ancient war. Edward is not an assassin, he's a pirate, motivated by greed and glory rather than ideology. He's a skilled fighter and sailor, but he's also selfish, impulsive, and willing to betray anyone if it serves his interests. He's exactly the kind of person the assassins would normally oppose, but fate has other plans. Edward kills an assassin named Duncan Walpole and steals his identity. They're planning to sell assassin secrets to the Templars for gold. This deception brings him into contact with both organisations, and Edward quickly realises that there's more at stake than he initially understood. The Templars are searching for a place called the Observatory, an Isu temple that can spy on anyone in the world by using their blood. With this power, the Templars could monitor and control humanity on an unprecedented scale, making resistance impossible. And Edward's greed leads him to seek the observatory for himself, believing he can use it to become wealthy beyond imagination. But as he pursues this goal, he watches his friends die one by one, victims of the conflict he's helped escalate. His closest companions, pirates like Edward Thatch, Blackbeard, Benjamin Hornigold, and Mary Read, are killed by the Templars, the British Navy, or the harsh realities of pirate life. Edward begins to understand that his selfish pursuit of wealth has cost him everything that truly mattered. The turning point comes when Edward's wife Caroline dies while he's away pursuing his dreams of fortune. He receives a letter informing him of her death, and he realises that he's wasted years chasing gold while neglecting the people he loved. The observatory, which he once saw as the key to wealth and power, now seems like a curse, a source of suffering and death. Edward makes a choice. He will help the assassin secure the observatory and prevent the Templars from using it, not for ideology or principle, but because he's seen the cost of letting such power fall into the wrong hands. Edward joins the Assassin Brotherhood, not as a true believer, but as a man seeking redemption. He helps secure the observatory, ensuring that neither assassins nor Templars can use it to spy on humanity. He returns to England with his daughter Jennifer, determined to be a better father than he was a husband. He trains his son Haytham in the ways of the assassins, hoping to pass on the skills and knowledge he's gained. Edward Kenway, the selfish pirate, becomes a dedicated assassin, proof that people can change, that redemption is possible even for those who have made terrible mistakes. But Edward's story ends in tragedy. He's murdered in his own home by mercenaries hired by the Templars, who have not forgotten his role in denying them the observatory. His death leaves his children orphaned, and his son Haytham is taken in by a Templar named Reginald Birch, who raises the boy as his own. Haytham grows up believing his father was killed by assassins, and Birch carefully shapes him into a loyal Templar, turning Edward's son against everything his father fought for. We move forward now to the American Revolution, into a conflict that will determine the future of a new nation, and the balance of power between assassins and Templars in the New World. The story begins not with an assassin, but with Haytham Kenway, Edward's son, now the Grand Master of the Templar Order's colonial rite. Haytham is intelligent, charismatic and utterly dedicated to the Templar cause. He believes that the chaos and violence of the American colonies can only be resolved through Templar control, through the imposition of order on a lawless frontier. Haytham travels to America to search for a precursor temple, an Isu vault that supposedly contains great power. He recruits allies, establishes Templar influence in the colonies, and works to secure the temple before the assassins can find it. During his search, he meets a Mohawk woman named Kanyekti Dayo, and despite their different backgrounds and beliefs, they fall in love. Their relationship produces a son, but Haytham's dedication to the Templar cause and Kaneti Ayo's commitment to protecting her people's freedom make their relationship impossible. They part ways, and Haytham never knows that he has a son. That son is Ratan Nyake Ton, who will later take the name Connor Kenway. He grows up in a Mohawk village, learning the ways of his people, living in harmony with the land. His childhood is shattered when Templar agents, seeking to secure land for their own purposes, attack his village and burn it to the ground. Connor's mother dies in the fire, and the boy is left traumatized and alone. He's told by a village elder that he must seek out the assassins, that only they can help him prevent further tragedies and protect his people from those who would exploit them. Connor travels to the assassin homestead and begins training under Achilles Davenport, an elderly assassin who has lost his own family and his faith in the Brotherhood. Achilles is bitter and cynical, but he sees potential in Connor and agrees to train him. Connor learns the ways of the assassins, masters the hidden blade and the techniques of stealth and assassination, and dedicates himself to protecting his people and fighting the Templars who threaten them. Connor's mission becomes intertwined with the American Revolution. He fights alongside the Patriots, believing that American independence will protect his people's lands and freedom. He meets George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and other founding fathers, helping them in their struggle against British rule. But Connor gradually realizes that the revolution is more complicated than he thought, that the Patriots are not the heroes he believed them to be, and that American independence might not protect his people after all. The conflict becomes deeply personal when Connor discovers that his father, Haytham Kenway, is the Grand Master of the Templars in America, and a father and son find themselves on opposite sides of the ancient war, each believing they're fighting for a better future, but unable to reconcile their different visions. They work together briefly, united against a common enemy, and in those moments, Connor sees that his father is not a monster, but a man who genuinely believes he's helping humanity, even if his methods are wrong. But their philosophical differences are too great to overcome. Haytham believes that order must be imposed on humanity for its own good, that freedom without guidance leads to chaos and suffering. Connor believes that freedom is worth any cost, that humanity must be allowed to make its own choices even if those choices lead to mistakes. Their conflict represents the eternal struggle between the assassins and Templars, between freedom and control, between chaos and order. Connor ultimately kills his father, a decision that haunts him for the rest of his life. He also kills Charles Lee, Haytham's second in command and the man responsible for the attack on Connor's village. With the Templar leadership in America destroyed, Connor has achieved his goal, but the victory feels hollow. The American Revolution succeeds, but Connor's people are not protected. The new American government seizes Native American lands just as the British did, and Connor realizes that he's fought for a cause that has betrayed him. Connor's story ends with him standing alone at his village, watching as his people are forced to leave their ancestral lands. He has won the war against the Templars, but he has lost everything that mattered to him. His mother is dead, his father is dead, his people are being displaced, and the freedom he fought for has not brought the justice he hoped for. Connor Kenway, the idealistic young assassin who believed he could change the world, ends as a disillusioned man who has learned that victory in the ancient war does not guarantee a better future. But these historical stories, as compelling as they are only half of the Assassin's Creed narrative. The other half takes place in the modern day, in the 21st century, where the ancient conflict between assassins and Templars continues in a world of corporations, technology, and genetic memory. This is where we meet Desmond Miles, a bartender living in New York City in 2012, who is about to discover that he's descended from some of history's greatest assassins, and that his genetic memories hold the key to preventing a global catastrophe. Desmond was born into the Assassin Brotherhood. His parents were assassins, and they raised him on a farm that served as an assassin training facility, teaching him the skills and knowledge of the Brotherhood from childhood. But Desmond rejected this life, running away at 16 to live as a normal person, free from the ancient conflict that had defined his family for generations. He changed his name, used only cash to avoid leaving a paper trail, and tried to disappear into the anonymity of modern urban life. But the Templars found him anyway. In 2012, Desmond is kidnapped by Abstergo Industries, a massive multinational corporation that serves as the modern face of the Templar Order. Abstergo has developed a machine called the Animus, which can access genetic memories stored in DNA, allowing users to experience the lives of their ancestors as if they were living them. The Templars want to use Desmond's genetic memories to find the locations of pieces of Eden that his ancestors encountered, artifacts that the Templars can use to achieve their goal of controlling humanity. Desmond is forced into the Animus and made to relive the memories of Altair ibn Lahad during the Third Crusade. As Desmond experiences Altair's life, he begins to absorb his ancestors' skills and knowledge through a phenomenon called the bleeding effect, where memories and abilities from the Animus bleed over into the user's real life. Desmond, who has never been trained as an assassin, begins to develop Altair's combat skills, his parkour abilities, his instincts and reflexes. But Desmond also begins to see strange symbols and messages left by a previous Animus subject known only as Subject 16. This man, Clay Kaczmarek, was also descended from assassins and was forced to use the Animus by Abstergo. The experience drove him mad, and he eventually killed himself, but not before leaving hidden messages throughout Abstergo's facility, messages that only someone using the Animus could see. These messages warn Desmond about the coming catastrophe, about the solar flare that will devastate Earth, about the need to find the temples and prevent the disaster. Desmond is rescued from Abstergo by a team of modern assassins led by William Miles, who turns out to be Desmond's father. The assassins have their own Animus, and they need Desmond to continue exploring his genetic memories to find the pieces of Eden before the Templars do. Desmond is reluctant. He is still bitter about his childhood and resentful of being forced back into the conflict he tried to escape. But he agrees to help because the alternative is letting the Templars win. Desmond enters the Animus again, this time to experience the memories of Ezio Auditore da Firenze. He lives through Ezio's entire life, from the execution of his family to his final retirement, absorbing decades of experience and skill. Through Ezio's memories, Desmond learns about the Isu, about the vaults and temples they left behind, about the warnings they recorded for future generations. He also continues to develop as an assassin, gaining abilities that would normally take years of training to master. The bleeding effect becomes more pronounced. Desmond starts to have trouble distinguishing between his own memories and those of his ancestors. He sees Altair and Ezio as if they're standing beside him, hears their voices, experiences their emotions. Together the boundaries between past and present, between self and ancestor, begin to blur. This psychological strain is dangerous, but it's also necessary. Desmond needs the skills and knowledge of his ancestors to survive what's coming. Through Ezio's memories, Desmond learns about a grand temple, an Isu vault that contains the technology to prevent the solar flare. The temple is hidden beneath the ruins of an ancient civilization in upstate New York, and it can only be opened by someone with a high concentration of Isu DNA, someone like Desmond. The assassins race to find the temple before the Templars, knowing that whoever controls it will have the power to save or doom humanity. Desmond and his team find the temple and enter it, but they discover that activating the technology requires a sacrifice. The temple systems are designed to channel massive amounts of energy, and someone needs to serve as a conduit for that energy. Yeah, a role that will certainly be fatal. Desmond is confronted by Juno, an Isu who's been manipulating events from the shadows, and by Minerva, who warns him that activating the temple will save humanity from the solar flare, but will also release Juno, who has her own plans for humanity's future. Desmond is faced with an impossible choice. If he does nothing, the solar flare will devastate Earth, killing billions and sending humanity back to the Stone Age. If he activates the temple, Dia's sake, he will save humanity from the flare but will die in the process, and will release Juno, who may prove to be an even greater threat. There is no good option, no solution that doesn't involve terrible cost. Desmond chooses to activate the temple, sacrificing himself to save humanity, believing that future generations will find a way to deal with Juno. Desmond's death marks a turning point in the modern-day story. The assassins have lost their most important asset, the man whose genetic memories held the key to finding the pieces of Eden and understanding the Isu. The Templars, through Abstergo, continue their work, using the Animus technology to explore the genetic memories of other individuals, searching for artifacts and knowledge that can help them achieve their goals. The ancient conflict continues, but without Desmond, the assassins must find new ways to oppose the Templars. The story continues with new protagonists in the modern day, and individuals who are drawn into the conflict between assassins and Templars, who use the Animus to explore the memories of other historical assassins. Through these memories, we see more of the ancient war, more of the struggle between freedom and control that has defined human history. We see assassins in Victorian London, in revolutionary France, in ancient Greece, in Viking Age England, each one fighting the same battle in their own time and place. The Assassin's Creed saga expands to ancient Greece, where we meet Cassandra, or Alexios depending on player choice, a Spartan mercenary living during the Peloponnesian War. Cassandra's story takes us even further back in time, to an era before the Assassin Brotherhood existed, when the conflict between freedom and control was just beginning to take shape. Cassandra is descended from Leonidas, the legendary Spartan king who died at Thermopylae, and she carries his spear, which is actually a piece of Eden disguised as a weapon. Cassandra's journey reveals more about the Isu and their legacy. She discovers that the Order of the Ancients, the precursor to the Templars, has existed for far longer than anyone realized, and that they've been manipulating Greek society for generations. She also learns about the cult of Cosmos, a secret organization that worships the Isu and seeks to use their artifacts to control humanity. Cassandra must dismantle this cult, hunting down its members one by one, while also dealing with the political intrigue of the Peloponnesian War. Through Cassandra's adventures, we learn more about the Isu themselves. She meets Isu who have survived in a form of digital immortality, their consciousness preserved in advanced technology. These Isu reveal more about the catastrophe that destroyed their civilization, about their attempts to prevent it, and about their warnings for humanity. Cassandra learns that the solar flare that destroyed the Isu civilization is part of a cycle, that similar catastrophes have occurred throughout Earth's history, and that another one is coming. Cassandra also discovers that she has a high concentration of Isu DNA, making her more than human, but less than Isu. This genetic heritage gives her enhanced abilities. She's stronger, faster, and more resilient than normal humans, and she can use pieces of Eden without being corrupted by them. She lives for centuries, far beyond a normal human lifespan, watching civilizations rise and fall, always working to protect humanity from those who would control it. The story moves to Viking Age England, where we meet Eivor, a Viking raider who becomes entangled in the conflict between the Hidden Ones, as the assassins are still called in this era, and the Order of the Ancients. Eivor is not initially interested in this ancient war. They're focused on establishing a settlement for their clan, on raiding and trading, on building a new life in England. But as Eivor becomes more involved with both organisations, they begin to understand the larger stakes. Eivor's story reveals that the conflict between assassins and Templars is not just about philosophy or power, it's about the very nature of humanity and its relationship with the Isu. Eivor discovers that they are the reincarnation of an Isu named Odin, that their consciousness carries memories and personality traits from this ancient being. This revelation raises profound questions about identity, free will, and the extent to which humans are truly free from the influence of those who came before. Through Eivor's experiences, we see the Hidden Ones evolving into the assassin brotherhood we know from later eras. They're refining their techniques, establishing their traditions, spreading their influence across Europe. We also see the Order of the Ancients transforming, becoming more organised and sophisticated, laying the groundwork for what will eventually become the Knights Templar. The ancient war is taking shape, the battle lines are being drawn, and the conflict that will define human history for the next 1,000 years is beginning in earnest. The modern-day story continues with Layla Hassan, a researcher working for Abstergo who discovers the truth about the company's Templar connections and defects to the assassins. Layla uses a portable animus to explore the memories of various historical figures, searching for Isu artifacts and knowledge that can help the assassins in their ongoing struggle against the Templars. Through her research, she uncovers more about the Isu, about their technology, and about the threats facing humanity. And Layla's story brings the modern-day narrative to a critical point. She discovers that the catastrophe Desmond died to prevent was only delayed, not stopped. The solar flare is still coming, and humanity is still in danger. But Layla also discovers that there might be another way to save humanity, a solution that doesn't require sacrifice or the release of dangerous Isu entities. She must navigate the complex politics of the Assassin Brotherhood. We deal with the psychological effects of prolonged animus use, and make choices that will determine humanity's future. The pieces of Eden remain central to the conflict. These artifacts, scattered across the world and hidden throughout history, continue to shape human events. The apples of Eden can control minds, making entire populations obedient to the wielder's will. The shrouds of Eden can heal injuries and extend life, making their bearers nearly immortal. The swords of Eden grant unmatched combat prowess. The staves of Eden provide authority and dominion. Each artifact is a tool of immense power, and each one is sought by both assassins and Templars for different reasons. The assassins generally seek to secure the pieces of Eden and keep them out of anyone's hands, believing that such power is too dangerous to be used. They've seen throughout history how these artifacts corrupt their wielders, how even the best intentions can be twisted by the power to control others. The assassins believe that the pieces of Eden should be hidden away, locked in vaults where they can't harm anyone, preserved but never used. The Templars, by contrast, believe that the pieces of Eden should be used to guide humanity toward a better future. They argue that humanity is too chaotic, too prone to violence and self-destruction, to be left to its own devices. The Templars believe that with the power of the pieces of Eden, they can create a world of perfect order, where war and suffering are eliminated, where everyone knows their place and follows the path laid out for them. It's a vision of peace through control, of freedom sacrificed for security. This philosophical divide is the heart of the Assassin-Templar conflict. Both organizations claim to want what's best for humanity, but they have fundamentally different ideas about what that means. The Assassins believe that freedom is the highest good, that humanity must be allowed to make its own choices even if those choices lead to mistakes and suffering. They believe that growth comes through struggle, that wisdom comes through error, and that a controlled humanity is not truly human at all. The Templars believe that order is the highest good, that humanity needs guidance and structure to reach its full potential. They believe that freedom without direction leads to chaos, that most people are not capable of making good choices for themselves, and that a small group of enlightened individuals should guide humanity's development for its own good. They see themselves not as tyrants, but as shepherds, protecting humanity from its own worst impulses. Neither side is entirely right or entirely wrong. The Assassin's commitment to freedom can lead to chaos and suffering, as people make poor choices and harm themselves and others. The Templars' commitment to order can lead to tyranny and oppression, as individual freedom is sacrificed for the collective good. The conflict between these two philosophies has no clear resolution, no obvious answer, and that's what makes it compelling. Both sides have valid points. Both sides have committed terrible acts in pursuit of their goals, and both sides believe they're fighting for humanity's future. Throughout history, this conflict has shaped major events. The Assassins were involved in the assassination of Julius Caesar, preventing him from using a piece of Eden to control Rome. The Templars were behind the Crusades, using religious fervour to search for Isu artifacts in the Holy Land. The Assassins supported the American Revolution, believing that independence would protect human freedom. The Templars infiltrated the French Revolution, trying to use the chaos to establish their own order. Every major historical event, every revolution and war and social change has been influenced by this shadow war. But the conflict is not just about grand historical events. It's also about individual choices, about people deciding what they believe and what they're willing to fight for. Every assassin and every Templar is a person with their own motivations, their own doubts, their own reasons for choosing their side. Some are true believers, utterly convinced of their cause's righteousness. Others are more pragmatic, or choosing their side based on personal loyalty or practical considerations. And some, like Edward Kenway, start on one side and end on another. their beliefs evolving as they experience the consequences of the conflict. The Animus technology adds another layer to the story. This device, which allows people to experience the genetic memories of their ancestors, raises profound questions about identity, memory, and the nature of consciousness. When Desmond experiences Altair's memories, is he Altair, or is he Desmond watching Altair? When the bleeding effect causes him to absorb Altair's skills and personality traits, is he still fully himself, or has he become a hybrid of multiple people? The Animus also raises questions about the nature of history and truth. The memories accessed through the Animus are subjective experiences, filtered through the perceptions and biases of the person who lived them. They're not objective historical records, but personal narratives, and different people might remember the same events differently. The Animus shows us history as it was experienced, not as it was recorded, and sometimes these two versions of history conflict. Abstergo's use of the Animus technology is particularly troubling. The company has developed entertainment products based on historical memories, allowing ordinary people to experience the lives of historical figures through video games and virtual reality experiences. On the surface, this seems harmless. It's just entertainment, a way for people to learn about history in an engaging way. But Abstergo is using these products to shape public perception, to present history in ways that support the Templar worldview, to subtly influence millions of people toward accepting control and order. This is the Templar strategy in the modern world. Not open conquest or violent revolution, but subtle manipulation through media, technology, and corporate power. Lee Abstergo is one of the world's largest corporations, with influence in pharmaceuticals, technology, entertainment, and countless other industries. Through this influence, the Templars can shape society without anyone realizing they're being controlled. It's a more sophisticated approach than the Templars of previous eras used, but it's no less effective. The assassins struggle to oppose this modern Templar strategy. They're a secret society, operating in the shadows, with limited resources and numbers. They can't compete with Abstergo's wealth and influence, can't reach the millions of people who are being subtly manipulated through Templar-controlled media. The assassins must rely on individual actions, on exposing Templar plots, on protecting key individuals and artifacts, on maintaining the balance of power so that neither side can achieve total victory. This balance is crucial. If the Templars win, humanity will be controlled, its freedoms sacrificed for order and security. If the assassins win completely, the Templars argue, humanity will descend into chaos, with no one to guide or protect it. The conflict must continue. The balance must be maintained, because neither extreme is desirable. This is the tragedy of the Assassin's Creed universe. The war can never truly be won, only fought, generation after generation, with no end in sight. The Isu remain a presence throughout the story, even though they've been extinct for thousands of years. Their artifacts, their temples, their warnings continue to shape human events. The Isu foresaw the catastrophe that would destroy their civilization, and they tried to prevent it, but they failed. They left behind warnings for humanity, hoping that humans would learn from their mistakes and find a way to survive the next catastrophe. But the Isu also left behind their own conflicts, their own divisions, and these ancient disagreements continue to influence events in the present. Some Isu, like Minerva, genuinely wanted to help humanity survive. They created the temples and vaults, stored their knowledge, left warnings and instructions for future generations. They saw humans not as slaves, but as successors, as the species that would inherit the Earth after the Isu were gone. These Isu hoped that humanity would learn from their mistakes, Yassi would avoid the conflicts and hubris that led to the Isu's downfall, and would build a better civilization than the Isu ever achieved. Other Isu, like Juno, had different plans. Juno was imprisoned by her fellow Isu for attempting to seize power, and she spent thousands of years in digital form plotting her return. She manipulated events throughout history, influencing both assassins and Templars, always working toward her goal of being released and taking control of humanity. Juno represents the danger of the Isu legacy. Not all of them were benevolent, and not all of their plans were for humanity's benefit. The conflict between different Isu factions mirrors the conflict between assassins and Templars. The Isu were not united, did not all share the same goals or philosophies. Some wanted to help humanity, others wanted to control it, and still others wanted to destroy it and start over. These ancient divisions continue to play out through the artifacts and knowledge the Isu left behind, through the temples and vaults that contain their technology, through the genetic legacy they pass down to certain human bloodlines. The genetic component of the Assassin's Creed story is fascinating and troubling. Certain humans carry a high concentration of Isu DNA, making them more than ordinary humans. These individuals have enhanced abilities, can use pieces of Eden without being corrupted, and can access Isu temples and technology that ordinary humans cannot. Desmond Miles is one of these individuals, descended from multiple assassin bloodlines, carrying the genetic legacy of Altair, Ezio, Xona, and others. This genetic legacy raises questions about destiny and free will. Are these individuals special because of their choices and actions, or are they special because of their DNA? Is Desmond a hero because of who he is, or because of who his ancestors were? The game suggests that both factors matter. Genetics provides potential, but choices determine outcomes. Desmond has the genetic legacy of great assassins, but he must choose to embrace that legacy, to develop his abilities, to make the sacrifices necessary to save humanity. The bleeding effect, where Animus users absorb the memories and abilities of their ancestors, further complicates questions of identity. More when Desmond gains Altair's combat skills through the bleeding effect, are those skills truly his, or is he just channeling his ancestor? When he starts to see and hear his ancestors, is he going mad, or is he accessing a deeper level of genetic memory? The game never provides clear answers, leaving these questions open for interpretation. The modern-day assassins are a shadow of what the Brotherhood once was. They're scattered, poorly organised, constantly on the run from Templar agents. They lack the resources and infrastructure of their historical counterparts, operating out of safe houses and temporary bases rather than fortresses and cities. The modern assassins must adapt to a world where their traditional methods, assassination, infiltration, direct action, are less effective against an enemy that operates through corporations, media, and technology. William Miles, Desmond's father, represents the old guard of the Assassin Brotherhood. He's dedicated to the cause. He's willing to sacrifice anything and anyone to oppose the Templars, including his own son. William raised Desmond in the Brotherhood, trained him from childhood, and was devastated when Desmond ran away. When Desmond returns, William sees him not as a son but as an asset, a tool to be used in the war against the Templars. This cold pragmatism reflects the toll that centuries of conflict have taken on the Brotherhood. They've become so focused on the war that they've lost sight of the humanity they're supposed to be protecting. Sean Hastings and Rebecca Crane represent a different approach to the modern assassin brotherhood. They're tech-savvy, adaptable, willing to use modern tools and methods to oppose the Templars. Sean is a historian and researcher, where using his knowledge to uncover Templar plots and understand historical events. Rebecca is an engineer and programmer, maintaining the assassin's animus and developing new technology to counter Abstergo's advantages. Together, they represent the Brotherhood's attempt to evolve, to adapt to the modern world while maintaining their core principles. The Templar Order in the modern era is represented primarily through Abstergo Industries. The company is led by individuals who genuinely believe in the Templar philosophy, who think they're working to create a better world through control and order. They're not cartoon villains. They're intelligent, sophisticated people who have convinced themselves that their goals justify their methods. They see the chaos and suffering in the world and believe that Templar control is the only way to end it. Abstergo's methods are insidious precisely because they're subtle. The company doesn't need to conquer nations or assassinate leaders. It can achieve its goals through market manipulation, media influence, and technological control. Abstergo can shape public opinion through its entertainment products, can influence government policy through its lobbying efforts, can monitor and track individuals through its technology. The modern Templars are winning not through force, but through persuasion, making people want to be controlled, and convincing them that freedom is dangerous and order is desirable. The Pieces of Eden remain the ultimate prize in the modern conflict. Both assassins and Templars are searching for these artifacts, knowing that whoever controls them will have an enormous advantage. But the artifacts are dangerous, corrupting their wielders, tempting them with power that no human should possess. The history of the Pieces of Eden is a history of corruption and tragedy. Even the best people, with the best intentions, have been twisted by their power. Altair spent decades studying the Apple of Eden, and while he gained great knowledge, he also became isolated and obsessed, losing touch with the people around him. Ezio chose to walk away from the apple, recognizing that its power was too dangerous to use. Desmond used a piece of Eden to save humanity but died in the process. The artifacts offer power, but they demand a price, and that price is often higher than anyone expects to pay. The temples and vaults left by the Isu are equally dangerous. They contain knowledge and technology that could revolutionize human civilization, but they also contain warnings, traps, and entities like Juno who have their own agendas. Accessing these temples requires individuals with high concentrations of Isu DNA, and even then the process is dangerous. The temples are not gifts, they're tests, challenges left by the Isu to determine whether humanity is worthy of their legacy. The Grand Temple, which Desmond activates to prevent the solar flare, is the most important of these sites. It contains technology capable of manipulating Earth's magnetic field, of deflecting solar radiation, of preventing the catastrophe that destroyed the Isu civilization. But activating this technology requires a human sacrifice, someone to serve as a conduit for the massive energies involved. The Isu designed their technology to require sacrifice, perhaps as a test of humanity's willingness to give up individual life for collective survival. Desmond's sacrifice raises profound questions about heroism and duty. He chooses to die to save billions of people he'll never meet, to protect a future he'll never see. It's a selfless act, but it's also a tragic one. Desmond never wanted to be a hero, never wanted to be part of the ancient war, and he dies fulfilling a destiny he tried to escape. his sacrifice saves humanity from the solar flare, but it also releases Juno, potentially creating a new threat that future generations will have to face. The release of Juno sets up future conflict in the Assassin's Creed universe. She's an issue with her own plans for humanity, plans that involve neither freedom nor Templar-style control, but something else entirely. Juno represents a third faction in the conflict, one that predates both Assassins and Templars. You're one that sees humanity not as something to be protected or guided, but as something to be used for her own purposes. Dealing with Juno becomes a priority for both Assassins and Templars, forcing them into an uneasy alliance against a common enemy. The story continues to expand, exploring new time periods and new conflicts. We see assassins in Victorian London during the Industrial Revolution, fighting against Templar industrialists who are exploiting workers and using technology to control the population. We see assassins in revolutionary France, caught up in the chaos of the Terror, trying to protect innocent people, while also opposing Templar manipulation of the revolution. We see assassins in ancient Egypt, in Viking Age England, in classical Greece, each one fighting the same battle in their own time and place. Each historical setting reveals new aspects of the conflict. In Victorian London, the conflict is about industrialisation and its impact on society, about whether technological progress should be controlled or allowed to develop freely. In revolutionary France, the conflict is about the nature of revolution itself, about whether violent upheaval can create a better society, or whether it just replaces one form of tyranny with another. In ancient Greece, the conflict is about democracy and freedom, about whether people can govern themselves or whether they need philosopher kings to guide them. These historical conflicts mirror modern debates about freedom, security, and the role of authority in society. The Assassin's Creed series uses history as a lens to examine contemporary issues, asking questions about surveillance, corporate power, government control, and individual liberty. The games don't provide easy answers, they present different perspectives. These show the costs and benefits of different approaches, and leave players to draw their own conclusions. The creed itself, "Nothing is true, everything is permitted," is a philosophical statement that has been interpreted in many ways. On the surface, it sounds like nihilism, like a rejection of all moral standards, but the assassins understand it differently. Nothing is true means that there are no absolute truths, no universal laws that apply in all situations, and no simple answers to complex questions. Everything is permitted means that individuals must make their own choices, must take responsibility for their actions, must navigate moral complexity without relying on rigid rules or external authority. This philosophy is both liberating and terrifying. It grants individuals complete freedom to choose their own path, but it also places complete responsibility on them for the consequences of their choices. There's no authority to blame, no rules to hide behind, no certainty to cling to. The assassins must make difficult decisions, must live with the consequences of their actions, must accept that they might be wrong. It's a philosophy that requires courage, wisdom, and humility, qualities that not all assassins possess. The Templars reject this philosophy, arguing that it leads to chaos and moral relativism. They believe in absolute truths, in universal principles that should guide human behaviour. They believe that some choices are objectively right and others are objectively wrong, and that a moral society requires clear rules and strong enforcement. The Templar philosophy provides certainty and structure, but it also requires individuals to surrender their judgment to authority, to follow rules even when those rules seem unjust. Neither philosophy is perfect. The assassin philosophy can lead to moral paralysis, to individuals making terrible choices because they believe everything is permitted. The Templar philosophy can lead to tyranny, to individuals enforcing their vision of truth on others who disagree. The conflict between these philosophies has no resolution because both have valid points and both have serious flaws. The best approach probably lies somewhere between the extremes, but finding that balance is the work of generations. The Assassin Brotherhood has evolved significantly over the centuries. The Hidden Ones of ancient Egypt were a small group of warriors fighting against a specific enemy. The Assassins of the Crusades were a more organised force, with fortresses, training programs, and a clear hierarchy. The assassins of the Renaissance were integrated into society, operating through networks of allies and informants. The modern assassins are scattered and disorganized, and struggling to maintain their relevance in a world that has changed dramatically. This evolution reflects the changing nature of power and conflict. In ancient times, power was concentrated in the hands of kings and priests, and opposing that power required direct action. Assassination, sabotage, rebellion. In the modern world, power is more diffuse, spread across corporations, governments, media, and technology. Opposing modern power requires different tactics: information warfare, hacking, exposing corruption, influencing public opinion. The assassins must adapt or become irrelevant. The Templar Order has also evolved, but in different ways. The Templars have always been more organised and hierarchical than the Assassins, with clear chains of command and long-term planning. In the modern era, this organisational strength has allowed them to infiltrate and control major institutions, to accumulate wealth and influence, to shape society according to their vision. The Templars have adapted to the modern world more successfully than the Assassins, which is why they're winning the Shadow War. But the Templars' success comes with costs. Their organisation has become bureaucratic and impersonal, more concerned with maintaining power than with achieving their stated goals. Some Templars have lost sight of why they're fighting, becoming focused on power for its own sake rather than on creating a better world. The Templar Order risks becoming the very thing it claims to oppose, a source of chaos and suffering, a force that harms humanity rather than helping it. The individual stories within the Assassin's Creed universe are ultimately about people trying to do what they think is right in a complex and morally ambiguous world. Altair learns humility and wisdom through his failures. Ezio learns that revenge is hollow and that redemption is possible. Connor learns that idealism must be tempered with realism, that good intentions don't guarantee good outcomes. Edward learns that selfishness has costs and that redemption requires sacrifice. Desmond learns that sometimes the only way to win is to sacrifice yourself. These are human stories. Stories about growth and change, about learning from mistakes, about making difficult choices. The historical settings and the science fiction elements provide context and spectacle. But the heart of the Assassin's Creed series is always the human element, the characters, their relationships, their struggles, their triumphs and failures. The Assassin's Creed universe also explores themes of legacy and inheritance. Every assassin is connected to those who came before, carrying on a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. They inherit not just skills and knowledge, but also the burden of the conflict, the responsibility to continue the fight. This inheritance can be empowering. It connects individuals to something larger than themselves, gives them purpose and meaning. But it can also be oppressive. It limits choices, defines identity, traps people in a conflict they didn't choose. Desmond's story is particularly focused on this theme of inheritance. He's born into the Assassin Brotherhood, raised to be a warrior in the ancient war, but he rejects this inheritance and tries to live a normal life. When he's forced back into the conflict, he resents it, feels trapped by a destiny he didn't choose. But gradually, through experiencing his ancestors' memories, Desmond comes to understand and accept his inheritance. He sees the sacrifices his ancestors made, understands why they fought, and chooses to continue their work not because he has to, but because he believes it's right. This transformation from resentment to acceptance is a key part of Desmond's character arc. He moves from seeing his assassin heritage as a burden to seeing it as a gift, from feeling trapped by his ancestors' choices to feeling empowered by their example. By the end, when Desmond sacrifices himself to save humanity, he's not doing it because he's been forced to, or because he has no choice. He's doing it because he's chosen to embrace his inheritance and use it to make a difference. The Animus technology itself is a metaphor for inheritance and memory. We all carry the memories of our ancestors in some form, through stories, through culture, through genetic predispositions. The Animus makes this inheritance literal, allowing people to experience their ancestors' lives directly. This raises questions about how much of who we are is determined by our ancestors and how much is determined by our own choices. Are we just the sum of our inherited traits and memories, or do we have the ability to transcend our inheritance and become something new? The bleeding effect suggests that inheritance is more powerful than we might like to believe. When Desmond absorbs Altair's skills and personality traits, he's being shaped by his ancestor in ways he can't fully control. The boundaries between self and ancestor blur, and Desmond must struggle to maintain his own identity while also benefiting from his inherited abilities. This struggle reflects a universal human experience. We're all shaped by our ancestors, by the culture and knowledge they've passed down, but we must also forge our own identities and make our own choices. The pieces of Eden represent another form of inheritance, the technological and cultural legacy of the Izu. These artifacts are tools created by an extinct civilization, and they continue to shape human events thousands of years after their creators died. The Isu's legacy is both a gift and a curse. Their technology could help humanity achieve great things, but it could also destroy us if used improperly. Humanity must decide how to handle this inheritance, whether to use it or hide it, whether to learn from the Isu's mistakes or repeat them. The temples and vaults are similar. They're inheritances from the Isu, containing knowledge and warnings that could help humanity survive future catastrophes. But accessing this inheritance requires sacrifice and risk. The temples are not freely given, they must be earned. And the price of accessing them is often high. This reflects a truth about inheritance in general. We don't get to choose what we inherit, and sometimes our inheritance comes with costs and responsibilities we didn't ask for. The conflict between assassins and Templars is itself an inheritance, passed down through generations. Neither organization can remember exactly how or why the conflict started. It's been going on for so long that its origins are lost to history. But both sides continue fighting because that's what they've always done. Because the conflict has become part of their identity. Because walking away would mean abandoning everything their ancestors fought for. This is the tragedy of inherited conflict. It perpetuates itself, generation after generation, even when the original reasons for fighting have been forgotten. Breaking free from inherited conflict is one of the series' recurring themes. Or Ezio chooses to walk away from the Apple of Eden and retire from the Brotherhood, refusing to let the conflict consume his entire life. Edward Kenway tries to escape his past and build a new life, though he ultimately returns to the Assassins. Connor struggles with the realization that the conflict he inherited from his father has no clear resolution, that victory doesn't bring the justice he hoped for. Now, these characters all grapple with the question of whether it's possible to escape inherited conflict, or whether we're doomed to repeat the mistakes of our ancestors. The modern-day story suggests that inherited conflict can be transcended, but only through conscious choice and sacrifice. Desmond chooses to sacrifice himself not because he's been programmed to, or because he has no choice, but because he's decided that ending the conflict is worth his life. His sacrifice doesn't end the war between Assassins and Templars, but it does prevent a catastrophe that would have made that war irrelevant. Desmond breaks the cycle of inherited conflict by choosing something larger than the conflict itself: the survival of humanity. The Isu themselves struggled with inherited conflict. Their civilization was divided into factions with different philosophies and goals, and these divisions ultimately contributed to their downfall. When the catastrophe came, the Isu were too busy fighting each other to adequately prepare, and their civilization was destroyed as a result. The Isu's fate serves as a warning to humanity. Inherited conflict can be fatal, and sometimes the only way to survive is to set aside old grievances and work together against common threats. This series also explores the concept of historical memory and how it shapes the present. The Animus allows people to experience history directly, to see events as they actually happened, rather than as they've been recorded or remembered. This direct access to historical memory reveals that history is more complex and ambiguous than we usually acknowledge, that heroes and villains are rarely as clear-cut as we'd like to believe, and that the same events can be interpreted in radically different ways depending on perspective. Abstergo's use of the Animus to create entertainment products raises questions about who controls historical memory, and how that control shapes society. By presenting history in ways that support the Templar worldview, Abstergo is subtly influencing how millions of people understand the past, and by extension, how they think about the present and future. This is a form of control that's more insidious than physical force. It shapes consciousness itself, yet making people want to be controlled without realizing they're being manipulated. The Assassins fight against this control of historical memory by exposing the truth, by revealing the complexity and ambiguity that Abstergo tries to hide. But the Assassins face a challenge. Truth is often uncomfortable, and people often prefer comforting lies to difficult truths. The Assassins must convince people to embrace complexity and uncertainty, to reject simple narratives and easy answers, to think critically about the information they receive. This is a harder sell than the Templars' message of order and certainty. The series also examines the role of technology in society, and how it can be used for both liberation and control. The Animus is a perfect example. It's a technology that could revolutionize education and understanding, allowing people to experience history directly and learn from the past. But it's also a technology that can be used for surveillance and manipulation, allowing those who control it to shape consciousness and behavior. Technology itself is neutral. It's how we choose to use it that determines whether it serves freedom or control. This theme is particularly relevant in the modern era, where technology plays an increasingly central role in human life. Smartphones, social media, artificial intelligence, all of these technologies have the potential to enhance human freedom and capability. But they also have the potential to enable unprecedented surveillance and control. The Assassin-Templar conflict in the modern day is largely about who controls these technologies and how they're used. The Templars want to use technology to create their vision of ordered society, while the Assassins want to ensure that technology serves human freedom rather than undermining it. The Pieces of Eden can be seen as ancient technology that raises the same questions. These artifacts have immense power, and that power can be used for good or ill depending on who wields them and what their intentions are. The Isu created the Pieces of Eden to control humanity, but they could theoretically be used for other purposes, to heal, to educate, to enhance human capabilities. The question is whether any use of such powerful technology is justified, or whether the risk of abuse is too great to allow anyone to use them. The Assassins generally argue that the risk is too great, that the Pieces of Eden should be locked away where no one can use them. This position reflects a deep skepticism about power and those who wield it. The Assassins believe that power corrupts, that even the best people with the best intentions will be twisted by the possession of such artifacts. The history of the Pieces of Eden supports this view. Almost everyone who has used them has been corrupted or destroyed by them. The Templars argue that this is a waste, that the Pieces of Eden could be used to solve humanity's problems if wielded by the right people with the right safeguards. They believe that the Assassin's refusal to use the artifacts is itself a form of control, a decision to deny humanity access to tools that could improve life for everyone. The Templars see themselves as pragmatists willing to use available tools to achieve their goals, while they see the Assassins as idealists who let their principles prevent them from taking effective action. This debate about whether powerful technology should be used or hidden reflects real-world debates about nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence, and other potentially transformative technologies. Should we develop and use these technologies despite the risks, or should we restrict or ban them to prevent potential catastrophes? The Assassin's Creed series doesn't provide a clear answer, instead presenting both perspectives and allowing players to draw their own conclusions. The relationship between the historical and modern-day stories is complex and multi-layered. The historical stories are not just backstory or context, they're integral to understanding the modern conflict. The choices made by Altair, Ezio, Connor and other historical assassins continue to shape events in the present. The artifacts they hid, the knowledge they preserved, the alliances they formed, all of these have consequences that echo through the centuries. Desmond's journey through his ancestors' memories is also a journey of self-discovery. By experiencing the lives of Altair, Ezio and Connor, Desmond learns not just their skills but their wisdom, their mistakes, their growth. He sees how they grappled with the same questions he faces, questions about duty and choice, about inheritance and identity, yes, about what it means to be an assassin. Through their examples, Desmond finds his own path, makes his own choices, becomes his own person, rather than just a product of his genetic legacy. The historical stories also provide perspective on the modern conflict. By seeing how the Assassin-Templar War has played out across different eras and cultures, we understand that this is not a simple conflict with clear good guys and bad guys. We see Templars who genuinely believe they're helping humanity, the assassins who make terrible mistakes, and situations where neither side has a monopoly on truth or virtue. This historical perspective complicates our understanding of the modern conflict, preventing us from seeing it in simplistic terms. The series also explores how historical events are interpreted and reinterpreted over time. The same event can be seen as heroic or villainous depending on perspective and context. The assassination of Julius Caesar, for example, is presented as a necessary act to prevent Templar control of Rome, but it also triggered a civil war that caused immense suffering. Was it the right choice? The game doesn't provide a clear answer, instead showing the complexity and ambiguity of historical events. This ambiguity extends to the assassins themselves. They're not always heroes. They kill people. They manipulate events. They make choices that cause suffering even when they are trying to prevent it. The assassins believe they're fighting for freedom, but their methods often involve taking away the freedom of those they kill. This moral complexity makes the assassins more interesting and realistic than if they were simply heroic freedom fighters. They're people trying to do what they think is right in a complex world, and sometimes they fail, sometimes they make mistakes, sometimes they cause harm even when they're trying to help. The Templars are similarly complex. They're not cartoon villains, they're people who genuinely believe that order and control are necessary for humanity's survival and flourishing. Many Templars are motivated by a sincere desire to reduce suffering, to create a more stable and peaceful world, to protect humanity from its own worst impulses. Their methods are often ruthless, but their goals are not inherently evil. This complexity makes the conflict more interesting. It's not a simple battle between good and evil, but a philosophical disagreement about the nature of humanity and what's best for it. The series also examines the cost of the conflict on those who fight it. Being an assassin or a Templar is not glamorous. It's dangerous, isolating, and often tragic. Assassins live in constant danger, always looking over their shoulders, unable to form normal relationships or live normal lives. They sacrifice their own happiness and safety for a cause that may never be won, fighting a war that has no end. Yet the toll this takes on individuals is enormous, and we see it in characters like Achilles Davenport, who has lost his family and his faith, or like Altair, who becomes isolated and obsessed in his later years. The Templars pay a similar price. They must constantly scheme and manipulate, always working toward goals that may not be achieved in their lifetimes. They must sacrifice personal relationships and moral principles for the greater good as they see it. They must live with the knowledge that they're feared and hated by those who discover their true nature. The Templar path is not easy, and those who walk it pay a heavy price for their commitment to order and control. The series asks whether this price is worth paying. Is the cause, whether it's freedom or order, worth the sacrifices it demands? Is it worth spending your entire life fighting a war that may never end? Is it worth sacrificing your own happiness, your relationships, your moral principles? Different characters answer these questions differently. Some, like Ezio, eventually decide that the cause is not worth their entire life and choose to retire. Others, like Altair, remain committed to the end, believing that the cause is more important than any individual life. The modern-day story brings these questions into sharp focus. Desmond is forced to choose between his own life and the survival of humanity. It's an impossible choice, but it's also a clear one. The stakes are so high that personal considerations become irrelevant. Desmond's sacrifice is heroic, but it's also tragic. He never wanted to be a hero, never wanted to be part of the ancient war, and he dies fulfilling a destiny he tried to escape. His story asks whether heroism requires choice, or whether sometimes circumstances force heroism upon us. The Isu's role in the story adds another layer of complexity. They're not gods, despite how humans have worshipped them throughout history. They're a species that achieved great technological advancement, but ultimately failed to save themselves from catastrophe. Their legacy is ambiguous. They left behind tools and knowledge that could help humanity, but they also left behind warnings about the dangers of hubris and the limits of control. The Isu serve as a cautionary tale, showing what can happen when a civilization becomes too confident in its ability to shape reality according to its will. The Isu's creation of humanity raises profound ethical questions. They created humans as slaves, as tools to serve their needs, without regard for human autonomy or dignity. This act of creation was fundamentally exploitative, and it set in motion the conflict that would eventually destroy Isu civilization. The Isu's mistake was not in creating humanity, but in trying to control it, in refusing to grant humans the freedom and dignity that all sentient beings deserve. This mistake echoes through the Assassin-Templar conflict. The Templars are repeating the Isu's error, trying to control humanity for its own good, and the Assassins are fighting to prevent this repetition. The Adam and Eve story, reinterpreted through the Assassin's Creed lens, becomes a story about the birth of human freedom. Adam and Eve were not the first humans, but they were the first free humans, the first to resist the control of their creators. Their rebellion was not a sin but a necessary step in humanity's evolution, from tools to people. The Isu saw this rebellion as betrayal, but from a human perspective, it was liberation. This reinterpretation of the Adam and Eve myth reflects the series' central theme, the struggle for freedom against those who would control us. The solar flare that destroyed Isu civilization serves as a reminder that there are threats beyond human control, catastrophes that no amount of power or technology can prevent. The Isu, for all their advancement, could not save themselves from this natural disaster. Their failure suggests that there are limits to what any civilization can achieve, that some threats are beyond our ability to control or prevent. This humility in the face of cosmic forces is something both Assassins and Templars must learn. Their conflict, as important as it seems to them, is ultimately small compared to the larger forces that shape existence. The series also explores the concept of synchronization, the idea that experiencing someone else's memories requires understanding and empathizing with them. When Desmond uses the Animus, he must synchronize with his ancestors, must make the same choices they made, must understand why they acted as they did. This synchronization is not just a game mechanic, it's a metaphor for empathy and understanding. To truly understand someone, we must see the world through their eyes, must understand their motivations and constraints, must recognize their humanity, even when we disagree with their choices. This theme of empathy and understanding is crucial to the series' moral complexity. We're asked to empathize not just with the Assassins, but also with the Templars, so as to understand why they believe what they believe, to see the world from their perspective. This doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but it does mean we have to recognize them as people with genuine beliefs and motivations, rather than as simple villains. This empathy complicates the conflict, making it harder to see one side as purely right and the other as purely wrong. The hidden blade, the assassin's signature weapon, is itself symbolic. It's a weapon that can be concealed, that strikes from hiding, that kills quickly and quietly. It represents the assassin's approach to conflict. They work in the shadows, strike at key targets, avoid open confrontation. The hidden blade is also a weapon that requires skill and precision. It's not a tool for indiscriminate violence, but for targeted elimination of specific threats. This reflects the assassin's philosophy. They don't seek to control or dominate, but to remove those who would control and dominate others. The Templar cross, by contrast, represents their approach: open, organised, hierarchical. The Templars don't hide in shadows. They work through institutions, through established power structures, through visible organisations. They seek to control society from within, to shape it according to their vision through legitimate means. The contrast between the hidden blade and the Templar cross reflects the fundamental difference in how the two organisations operate. One works in secret, the other in the open. One seeks to disrupt power, the other to wield it. The Eagle Vision, another signature assassin ability, represents enhanced perception and understanding. Those with Eagle Vision can see things others miss, can identify threats and allies, can perceive the world with greater clarity. This ability is genetic, passed down through bloodlines with high concentrations of Izu DNA, but it's also symbolic. The assassins see what others don't, understand connections and patterns that remain hidden to ordinary people. Eagle Vision represents the assassin's role as watchers and protectors, as those who see threats before they fully manifest and act to prevent them. The series' exploration of free will versus determinism is particularly fascinating. The Animus shows us that history has already happened, that the choices have already been made, that the outcomes are fixed. When Desmond experiences Altair's memories, he's not making choices. He's experiencing choices that were made centuries ago. This creates a tension between the appearance of choice and the reality of predetermined outcomes. Are we truly free to choose, or are our choices determined by genetics, by history, by forces beyond our control? The bleeding effect suggests that we're more determined than we'd like to believe. When Desmond absorbs Altair's skills and personality traits, he's being shaped by forces outside his conscious control. His choices are influenced by his ancestors, by genetic memories he didn't choose to inherit. This raises uncomfortable questions about the extent to which we're truly free, about how much of our behaviour is determined by inheritance and how much by conscious choice. But the series also affirms the reality of choice. Desmond's final decision to sacrifice himself is presented as a genuine choice, not a predetermined outcome. He could have chosen differently, could have let the catastrophe happen, could have refused to play the role destiny seemed to have assigned him. His choice matters precisely because it wasn't predetermined, because he had the freedom to choose otherwise. This tension between determinism and free will is never fully resolved, reflecting the complexity of these philosophical questions. The concept of the creed, nothing is true, everything is permitted, can be understood as a response to this tension. And if nothing is absolutely true, if there are no predetermined outcomes or fixed destinies, then everything is permitted, all choices are possible. The creed is an affirmation of radical freedom, a rejection of determinism in all its forms, but it's also a recognition of responsibility. If everything is permitted, then we must take full responsibility for our choices, must accept the consequences of our actions, without blaming fate or destiny or external forces. The Templars reject this radical freedom, arguing that it leads to chaos and moral relativism. They believe in absolute truths, in fixed principles that should guide behaviour, in the need for structure and authority to prevent people from making destructive choices. The Templar philosophy is more comfortable, more certain, but it also requires surrendering freedom to authority, accepting that others know better than you what you should do and how you should live. Then this philosophical conflict is the heart of the series. It's not really about pieces of Eden or ancient conspiracies or genetic memories. It's about fundamental questions of how humans should live, how society should be organized, what balance should be struck between freedom and order. These are questions that every society must grapple with. Questions that have no final answers. Questions that must be continually renegotiated as circumstances change. The series also explores the concept of legacy and what we leave behind. Every character in Assassin's Creed is concerned with legacy. What will they be remembered for? What impact will they have on the future? What will survive of them after they're gone? Altair leaves behind his codex and his library, preserving his knowledge for future generations. Ezio leaves behind a rebuilt brotherhood and a message about the importance of walking away from power. Iacona leaves behind a more ambiguous legacy, having achieved his goals but at great personal cost. Desmond's legacy is perhaps the most significant. He saves humanity from the solar flare, but he also releases Juno, creating a new threat for future generations to face. His legacy is mixed, neither purely positive nor purely negative, reflecting the complexity of real human legacies. We all leave behind both positive and negative impacts, both solutions and new problems, then both wisdom and mistakes. Desmond's legacy reminds us that heroism is not about achieving perfect outcomes, but about making the best choices we can with the information and resources available to us. The modern assassins must grapple with the legacy left by Desmond and by centuries of assassins before him. They inherit not just knowledge and skills, but also unresolved conflicts, unfinished business, and new threats created by previous generations' choices. This is the burden of legacy. We don't get to choose what we inherit, and sometimes our inheritance includes problems we didn't create and don't know how to solve. The series also examines the role of myth and legend in shaping identity and behaviour. The assassins have their legends, Altair, Ezio, and others who are remembered as heroes and role models. These legends inspire new generations of assassins, give them examples to follow, provide them with a sense of connection to something larger than themselves. But legends can also be burdensome, creating expectations that are impossible to meet, setting standards that no real person can achieve. Desmond struggles with this burden of legend. He's descended from some of history's greatest assassins, and everyone expects him to live up to their example. But Desmond is not Altair or Ezio. He's his own person, with his own strengths and weaknesses, his own path to follow. The pressure to live up to legendary ancestors is enormous, and it takes Desmond time to find his own way, to become his own kind of hero rather than trying to be a copy of his ancestors. The Templars have their own legends and heroes, figures like Rodrigo Borgia and Haytham Kenway, who are remembered for their dedication to the Templar cause. These legends serve the same function for Templars as assassin legends do for assassins. They inspire, they provide examples, they create a sense of continuity and purpose. But Templar legends also reveal the cost of their philosophy. Many of these legendary Templars died violently, betrayed by allies or killed by enemies, their grand plans ultimately failing. The series suggests that both organizations are trapped by their own legends, by the weight of history and tradition. The assassins must be stealthy warriors fighting for freedom, because that's what assassins have always been. The Templars must seek order and control because that's what Templars have always done. Breaking free from these inherited identities is difficult, perhaps impossible, but it may also be necessary for either organisation to evolve and adapt to changing circumstances. The Assassin's Creed universe is ultimately about the eternal human struggle to define ourselves and our society. The conflict between Assassins and Templars is a metaphor for the conflicts we all face, between freedom and security, between chaos and order, between individual autonomy and collective good. These conflicts have no final resolution because they're inherent to the human condition. We must constantly negotiate between competing values, must make difficult choices with imperfect information, must live with the consequences of our decisions. But the series also reminds us that history is not a simple narrative of progress or decline. It's a complex tapestry of choices and consequences, of intentions and outcomes, of victories and defeats that are often mixed and ambiguous. The Assassins win some battles and lose others. The Templars achieve some goals and fail at others. Neither side is consistently winning or losing. The conflict continues generation after generation, with the balance of power shifting back and forth. This lack of resolution is frustrating, but also realistic. Real conflicts don't have clean endings. Real philosophical disagreements don't get resolved with a single argument or action. The Assassin-Templar conflict continues because the questions it represents, questions about freedom, order, control and autonomy, are questions that every generation must answer for itself. There is no final answer, no ultimate solution. Only the ongoing work of negotiating between competing values and trying to create a society that balances freedom with order, autonomy with community, individual rights with collective needs. The pieces of Eden, the Izu temples, the genetic memories, all of these science fiction elements serve to make these philosophical questions more concrete and dramatic. They give the conflict stakes beyond abstract philosophy, making it about the survival of humanity and the shape of the future. But at its core, the series is asking timeless questions about how we should live, what kind of society we should create, and what we owe to each other and to future generations. The modern-day story, which has been criticised by some fans as less interesting than the historical stories, is actually crucial to the series' themes. It's in the modern day that we see the consequences of the ancient conflict, that we understand how choices made centuries ago continue to shape the present, and it's in the modern day that we see how the conflict has evolved, how both organisations have adapted to new circumstances while maintaining their core philosophies. And it's in the modern day that we see the ultimate stakes, the survival of humanity itself, threatened by both the solar flare and by the conflict between those who would control humanity and those who would free it. Desmond's journey from reluctant participant to willing hero mirrors the player's own journey through the series. We start as outsiders, learning about this ancient conflict, experiencing it through the memories of historical assassins. Gradually we become invested in the conflict, we understand the stakes, we care about the outcome. By the time Desmond makes his final sacrifice, we understand why he does it, why the cause is worth dying for, even if we might not make the same choice ourselves. The series' exploration of genetic memory and the animus raises fascinating questions about identity and consciousness. If we could experience our ancestors' memories, would we still be ourselves, or would we become a blend of multiple people? If we could absorb skills and knowledge from the past, would that make us more capable, or would it undermine our own development? The bleeding effect suggests that there are costs to accessing genetic memory, that the boundaries between self and other can become dangerously blurred. But the series also suggests that connection to the past, to our ancestors and their experiences, can be valuable and enriching. Desmond becomes a better person, a more capable assassin, through experiencing his ancestors' lives. He learns from their mistakes, benefits from their wisdom, and ultimately makes better choices because of what he's learned from them. This suggests that while we must maintain our own identities, we can also benefit from understanding and learning from those who came before us. The Assassin Brotherhood's motto, "We work in the dark to serve the light," encapsulates their philosophy and their burden. They do terrible things. They kill people, they manipulate events, they operate outside the law. But they do these things in service of a greater good, to protect human freedom and prevent tyranny. This moral complexity is what makes the assassins interesting. They're not simple heroes, they're people who have chosen to do dark work in service of light goals, and they must live with the moral weight of that choice. The Templars have their own version of this burden. They seek to control humanity, to limit freedom, to impose order, all things that sound tyrannical. But they do these things because they genuinely believe it's necessary for humanity's survival and flourishing. Yet they see themselves as shepherds protecting a flock that cannot protect itself, as wise leaders guiding humanity toward a better future. The Templars must live with the knowledge that they're feared and hated, that their methods are ruthless, but they believe the end justifies the means. Both organizations are trapped in a tragic cycle. The assassins fight for freedom, but their methods often involve taking away the freedom of those they kill. The Templars fight for order, but their methods create chaos and conflict. Each side's actions undermine their stated goals, creating the very problems they claim to be solving. This tragic irony is at the heart of the conflict. Both sides are sincere in their beliefs, both are trying to help humanity, but their conflict itself causes much of the suffering they're trying to prevent. Breaking this cycle would require both sides to recognize the validity of the other's concerns, to find a middle path between absolute freedom and absolute control. But such compromise seems impossible given how deeply entrenched both organizations are in their philosophies. The conflict continues not because either side is evil, but because both are convinced they're right, and the other is wrong. And neither is willing to consider that the truth might lie somewhere between their positions. The issue's fate serves as a warning about the dangers of this kind of intransigence. The issue were divided into factions with different philosophies, and they spent so much time fighting each other that they failed to adequately prepare for the catastrophe that destroyed them. Their inability to set aside their differences and work together for their common survival led to their extinction. Humanity faces a similar threat. If assassins and Templars cannot find a way to work together, or at least to stop fighting each other, they may doom humanity to the same fate that befell the Isu. The series ultimately suggests that the conflict between freedom and control, between chaos and order, is not something that can be resolved through victory by either side. Instead, it's a tension that must be managed, a balance that must be constantly maintained and adjusted. Neither absolute freedom nor absolute control is desirable or sustainable. The goal should not be for one side to win, but for both sides to recognize the validity of the other's concerns and to work toward a society that balances freedom with order, autonomy with community, individual rights with collective needs. This is a mature and nuanced view of political and philosophical conflict. It rejects the simplistic good versus evil narrative in favour of a more complex understanding of how different values and priorities can come into conflict, was how sincere people can disagree profoundly about fundamental questions, and how these disagreements can lead to violence and suffering even when everyone involved believes they're doing the right thing. The Assassin's Creed series, for all its science fiction elements and historical settings, is ultimately about us, about the choices we face, the values we hold, the kind of world we want to create. It asks us to think about freedom and control, about the price of security and the cost of liberty, about what we owe to each other and to future generations. It doesn't provide easy answers, but it asks important questions, and in doing so, it elevates video game storytelling to a level of philosophical sophistication rarely seen in the medium. The story of Assassin's Creed is far from over. New games continue to explore new time periods, new characters, new aspects of the ancient conflict. The modern-day story continues to evolve, with new protagonists taking up the fight after Desmond's sacrifice. The Isu's legacy continues to shape events, with new artifacts and temples being discovered, new threats emerging from the past. The conflict between assassins and Templars continues, as it has for thousands of years, as it likely will for thousands more. But through all these stories, through all these time periods and characters and conflicts, the core themes remain constant. The struggle for freedom against those who would control us, the tension between order and chaos, between security and liberty, the question of what kind of world we want to create and what we're willing to sacrifice to create it. These are the questions that define the Assassin's Creed universe, and they're questions that will remain relevant as long as humans exist to ask them. The lore of Assassin's Creed is vast, complex, and continually expanding. From the Isu civilization that existed before recorded history, through the founding of the Hidden Ones in ancient Egypt, through the adventures of Altair, Ezio, Connor, Edward, and countless other assassins across the centuries, to the modern-day struggle between Abstergo and the remnants of the Assassin Brotherhood. It's a story that spans millennia and touches on fundamental questions about human nature and society. It's a story about inheritance and choice, about the weight of history and the possibility of change. It's about people trying to do what they think is right in a complex and morally ambiguous world. It's about the cost of conflict and the difficulty of peace. It's about freedom and control, chaos and order, and the eternal human struggle to find balance between competing values. And ultimately, it's a story that reminds us that the choices we make matter, that we have the power to shape the future, and that the struggle for a better world is worth the cost, even when that cost is high. The Assassins and Templars may be fictional, but the questions they represent are real, and the answers we give to those questions will determine what kind of the world we create for ourselves and for future generations. This is the complete lore of Assassin's Creed, a saga of ancient conflicts and modern struggles, of powerful artifacts and genetic memories, and of heroes and villains who are often more complex than they first appear. It's a story that continues to evolve, that continues to ask important questions, and that continues to captivate audiences with its blend of history, science fiction, and philosophical depth. The ancient war continues, the balance shifts, and the future remains unwritten, waiting for the next generation of assassins and Templars to shape it according to their vision of what humanity should be.